Afternoon. My name is Chris Haddon with Youth Pledge for Employers, and I'm delighted to be joined by Jonathan Bensley-Byam from Architecture One. Hello there, Jonathan.
Hello, how are you going?
Hello, I'm not too bad. Yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. Midweek, so we're all good.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for giving your time to speak to me. And I guess my start of a turn question really has to be, can you tell me about Architecture One and what it is you do?
So we're a small architecture practice based in Hadley, and we do predominantly residential extensions, conversions, and a little bit of commercial work where we're adding offices into factory buildings.
Fantastic. Whenever I ask people that question, it's always brilliant when they can actually concisely explain what it is they do. Most people, I say, are a bit like, well, actually, I can't. But even I was able to follow that, so that's brilliant. And what kind of people do you have within your organisation to facilitate those different parts of the business?
So we obviously need someone like myself, who's the lead designer, to interpret customers' requirements and understand what they're trying to achieve. We then have CAD technicians, drawing staff, basically use the software packages. We have surveying staff that go out and meet the clients and obviously measure up these properties and commercial elements that we're then detailing on AutoCAD. And we have a lady who comes in 3 days a week and basically bolts everything together on the financial side.
Fantastic. And it's those kind of roles that people sometimes forget about, as you say, within a firm. I could probably imagine, as you say, sort of the people doing the designing and the creative side of things, but as we say, there's still someone who needs to do the finances and keep an eye on those things as well.
Yeah, you've got to have that back end that's making everything come together.
And just to sort of even define the process even more, so maybe you could explain to me about some of the kinds of projects and proposals that people have come to you and sort of how they've gone through the organisation to then the finished design, if you see what I mean.
So you mean like we would take a customer from like an inception stage, which is where they're just talking around what they're trying to achieve. We would then have several meetings where we talk around work we've done previously, give them examples of things that they could possibly achieve with the space they have or the budget they have, because it's important to be mindful of people's ability to what their expenditure is. It's very easy to design something beautiful and then that's outside of their reach financially. We then do a concept scheme. That normally then gets worked into some more detailed drawings. That then gets presented to your local council for planning. That would then hopefully achieve planning. We then put together drawings which you can cost for a builder, and then the contract will normally be awarded to a builder, and then the project starts on site.
Fantastic. Okay, no, that really, again, I'm a layman to this and I can follow that process, so that's always a good interpretation. If there was a young person looking to get into this field, so if we look maybe specifically at your role as a lead designer, what kind of traits and qualities would serve them well in this kind of role?
So you've got to have an idea of space and how spaces work within a home. Let's talk about residential because that's probably the bulk of what most people would approach. You've got to work out how space works for people, how light travels through a dwelling, and how to best serve how someone's going to live in that space. So anybody who's got any sort of strong art background and they can form things and have a great imagination, I think that's a great basis. I've always been that way, with a great sort of imagination for concepts and for how things look. This might sound crazy, but if you're really good with Lego, then you're probably going to be quite good in this role, because you're already trying to work out how everything goes together. And I mean, I stand by that. That's the basis of it. You've got to be interested in products and how things come together. I'm being a bit vague here. I don't know. You've just got to be interested in how your own home functions, how you move through your own home, what works, what doesn't. When you change your room around as a child, which we've all done, and it feels like a brand new space.
Yeah.
That's something which is, you may well change it from this is great, and within a very short space of time realise it doesn't actually function very well. That's a great basis for what we do and what we try and steer our clients to understand. Quite often we have people want to do something and it really doesn't work until you explain why it doesn't work. So those are perhaps the initial building blocks of working in design and working in architecture.
And I guess based on the point you said there, that sort of communication and resilience must be two skills required as well, in terms of, as you say, you need to communicate what you think is best and the reasons why to the client who's coming to you, and also, as you say, you're proposing what you think, and if the client, I guess, doesn't like that, I guess there's a degree of resilience about either communicating why it's the best way, or maybe if you come up with, say, this brilliant vision, and then it's, it doesn't fit what they like, the resilience to sort of go back. Not, I don't want to say back to the drawing board because that is so cliche, and I've just said it.
It's a bit of a pun, but yes, I mean there is truth in that. There is a sales element to this. There is trying to be intuitive to what your clients are trying to achieve and trying to shape your ideas, particularly if you know that they will work and they are proven, to get your client to understand that, but equally taking on board their point of view. I think there's a great underestimation of the amount of time in a design consultancy you spend trying to find examples and concepts of things that have already been done. And obviously now we've got the internet. When I started, Google wasn't what it is today. It was virtually non-existent in the early 90s. You can find an example of something which is close to what you're trying to portray if you haven't already done it yourself in your own work. And there's a great deal of that. So what you're saying, yeah, be empathetic, be able to understand your customers' needs, but equally be able to steer them to where they need to focus the most. So yes, you do need to be a good communicator and be able to listen.
Those are really useful, insightful bits of advice for a young person looking to get into this field in regards to their traits and their qualities. Touching on what you said there about sort of researching things, what kind of things would you advise someone who wants to work in this sector, maybe if they're, say, 60, 70 odd now, what kind of things can they be sort of reading, researching, doing in their spare time that might give them a little bit of an edge once they start to, really actually start thinking about this as a career?
Good question. Just trying to think back. It's a long time since I was 17. For me, my initial interest, so I'll talk about how I found it, which is hopefully will translate. I always liked studying instructions and studying plans. And I always looked at how circulation worked or how things came together with kits and those types of things. If you've got those interests, as far as developing this role, I would look for a foundation course in construction initially, because that's the route I took. Because I think if you understand how things come together, design is a much easier process. A lot of people go into architecture and related fields very much from a textbook level, which is what you're sort of asking of me. I don't think that's the best route. I think if you can get experience in school with a builder or anyone in a building trade, if you can get experience, obviously, in an architect's office, that would be great. But I think building blocks from the start, that's how I found it the easiest to understand how things work. And in my career, I've met people who've come the traditional route through college and university and have never had any ground experience. And I think the progression there is slow. So I would say to anybody that wants to get into this type of field, look for practical experience in the building trade, if you can, as a basis, because that's a great learn and a fast learn.
Again, that's really insightful, and it's interesting to hear about the different routes in and the different benefits of each. And thanks for sharing your own experience, because say that's what these employer talks are all about. It's easier to maybe sort of read things online or read about different routes, but actually better to hear from someone who, as you say, who's gone down a particular route and the benefits it's had. And with this role, I think naturally a lot of, it must present a lot of variety in terms of obviously different clients with different requests, different solutions to, to each proposal. Taking that into account, I know there's no such thing as a typical day. It doesn't exist in any profession. I'm saying that out loud. But, sort of in your role, what do the challenging days look like and what do the good days look like?
So the good days are where we've got a clear agreed brief and we can create in the knowledge that what we are creating isn't in any way abortive and it's going to be well received. That's definitely a good day. A challenging day is unfortunately where you get taken away from that side of the business and you're responding to emails, you're responding to queries, and you're just following up. But then that's the more administrative side of any business. You're pulled away from your love. And I think for a junior or mid role, you won't experience that as much. But obviously running the business, you do. So when I was sort of starting out in my career, it was more what I described as it was always a good day because you're always getting to do the drawing work and the design work because that's all that was filtered through to you. What I'm talking about with the other stuff happens a bit later, but that's a bad day. Admin is for me a bad day because it takes me away from my true passion, which is the design work.
Again, that's really interesting to hear because I think it's quite refreshing actually to hear that, as you say, there's an aspect of the job which, as I say, needs to be done, as you say, the admin, and as you say, you've got a clear part of the role that you're passionate about. I think it's a common misconception amongst a lot of young people that, if they go into certain jobs and stuff, they're either going to 100% love all of it or 100% hate all of it. Whereas I think a lot of people who have been in a particular profession or field for a long enough time will openly admit that, as you say, there are areas which you're clearly going to be passionate about and areas which are requirements to get to keep up business as usual operations.
Things that just need to be done, unfortunately. I think the variation helps keep you interested in the good bits, though. I mean, that's in all of our sort of processes in life. Yeah.
And this leads me quite nicely onto my final question, actually, because you started off that last response by talking about, your younger self when you sort of came into the field. And I've asked this question to all the employers I've done these employer talks with, which is if you could go back and speak to, say, your 17, 18-year-old younger self, taking into account of lessons you've learned, successes you've had, maybe mistakes you've made, what is the one piece of career advice you would actually go back and give to your younger self?
Well, that's a difficult one.
That's why I ask it.
Yeah. I would probably think I would have liked to have got. So I've realised the practical side of the business is the faster route to success. The learning side. I learned a great deal myself when I virtually built an extension on our own home as much as I could, project managed it. So I would probably say to my younger self, what I said earlier in this chat is do as much practical experience in construction related disciplines before you get to the desk job of design, because that will be the best grounding you can get.